So hearing Richie speak just inspired me to go home and grab my husband and sit on the couch and find this documentary on YouTube. I just want to share a couple of stories with you this morning. It felt really important to me to show you so much of that film because I can't convey with the same power and words what these men had to share. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm so grateful for Bell Hooks and that these men are embracing her just beautiful ideas and her way of sharing. You know, I can relate to these guys. Could you relate? Yeah, right? Patriarchy is this lose, 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 lose situation where we're all invited to step into these roles that go against our own authentic selves and even our own best interests. The men who, they say they're top 5, they were putting in who are the top 3 people in your life and what are your top 2 goals? And saying, that they were willing to give those up to be that their manhood mattered more to them than their personhood in that moment. Being accepted as a man was the most important. And in my family that I grew up in, I really appreciate how they talk about domination. In the family that I grew up in, and it mirrored the culture around me, there was a sense that domination was an effective tool to getting what you wanted. And I don't know if you grew up with some of that happening in your house, but I definitely did. And there are times even in my own life where having grown up in this culture and with that training in my family, there are times where when I'm scared or I feel backed into a corner, that there's part of me that wants to come out and dominate. There's this scared little kid in me who experienced some trauma as a child who wants to come out and then use that. It was a protector for me when I was a child, but it really goes against all of my values now. Domination, I'm pretty sure it's not a part of my ordination. My goal is to alleviate suffering in life. It's part of my call to ministry or the ways that I have experienced suffering and how I want to be a part of liberating my own mind and the people around me that, we don't have to live like this, y'all. We can read that book. I love when he said you just look up and you see what's actually happening and you think, why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? So I want to tell you about a time where I just watching this, and he's been in my head and in my heart, and so has Bell Hooks, and how this showed up in my life this last week. So a week ago Friday was really beautiful, and I picked up my son, who's 2, from preschool, and I said, hey, and we walked out the doors, and we were just giddy with joy because it was so nice. And I said, hey, what do you want to do tonight? It's Friday. And he said, get pizza. I was like, right on, buddy. And I said, well, we were thinking about going to the playground. He said, how about we get a pizza and take it to the playground? That's my boy. I was like, I am proud of you. And yes, let us do that. So the whole family was in the car, and Gabriel shared his brilliant idea, and that's what we did. So then when we get to the playground, there's other kids there, and they're happy, they're excited, it's so warm and nice, and we come walking up, and I hear them laughing, and they're climbing all over, and they're big kids, and then I hear some swearing, and one of the boys sitting over the side says, sorry about that. Hey, Colin, knock it off. There are other kids here now. And I just kind of giggle thinking, you know what, it's okay, because my 2-year-old doesn't even know what those words are yet, because somehow I haven't said them in front of him yet. So it's going to be okay. He won't even pay attention. So they're playing, and I'm just amazed at what my 2-year-old can do this year. He's going to be 3 soon compared to what he could do last year. It's like my heart's dropping as he climbs things and jumps. And as I'm doing that, I kind of out of the corner of my eye see these boys and these girls, and I just think, oh, they're flirting, and isn't that cute? They're hanging out at the playground and flirting. But then I start to hear, what are you, 12? Do you go to Callanan? I bet you don't even go to Callanan. You're probably not even 12. And it had the tone of mockery, and I realized, what exactly is going on here? And I realized that in my body, I felt afraid. I'm almost 43 years old. And I just knew there were a gaggle of teenage boys, and I felt afraid. And so I didn't turn my head and really look. I just kind of kept playing with my son and kind of glancing and trying to see what was going on. And eventually some of the girls went and sat on the swings, and And then I looked and I saw there was this other little girl who stayed behind. And they were playing and laughing, and then I heard one of the boys say, well, that's why you don't have any teeth, and haha, and they're laughing, and I just thought, like, what? And I saw something in her hand, and they're making fun of her for it, and then the boys went and rode their bikes around the park for a little bit. And so I saw this little girl, and I thought, and she opened it up, and it was a Polly Pocket. And I had just given my niece, who was 5 years old, one of these for Christmas, and so I walked over and said, oh, is that a Polly Pocket? And she said, yeah, and we were looking at it, and I said, oh, how old are you? And she said, 6, and I said, are you in first grade? She said, no, I'm a kindergartner. And I'm thinking, these boys are making fun of a kindergartner? And then they started to come back, and one of the boys came back, and then the other boys came back, and they were kind of teasing her again, and these other girls came over, and I realized they weren't just girls and boys hanging out there. They were all hanging out together in the beginning, but these were looked like 3 sisters. An older sister with 2 younger ones, and she was there watching out for them. And she took her sister over to be on the swings to get away from these boys, but the youngest, for whatever reason, was drawn to be closer to them. So after these boys are making fun of them again, and the sister comes over and she's like, Charlie, come on, and Charlie won't come, and finally Charlie takes a few steps away from the boys, and then the sister, I'm imagining, felt safe enough to actually walk over and take her hand and walk away. And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't feel safe. You don't feel safe. I'm looking around at the other parents and other kids. No one's coming over into that area. And that she didn't even feel safe to go take her sister's hand. And that just made me so sad. And so I noticed, and the girls, they're leaving, and I come back over, and one of the boys is there, and I just said, this just isn't right. Those girls just left scared. Did you see, the girl, when she took her sister's hand, she, had her shoulders up and her head was tight, and she was like, come on, Charlie. I'm like, that's not the body language of a person who's having fun, feeling free on a playground. And I know, and then the other boys came back, and so I started saying it to them. I was like, I'm sure you guys are just trying to have fun, but actually, did you notice their body language? They looked scared. They looked scared. And she's taking them, and they're running home, and that's just not right. Girls and women, we have the right to be free and be safe at a playground, or really anywhere we go. And I know you're probably just trying to be cool. I don't think you were, probably trying to be mean. You're just doing fun boy stuff, but it's not really right that that's how we tell boys to be. And one of the boys said, I'm so sorry if we ruined your recreation time. I'm sorry. And he's like, this is where you apologize. This is where you say sorry, Colin. And Colin wouldn't say sorry, and Colin wouldn't look at me. And I didn't want to shame them, because I know it's a lose-lose situation, right? I could see the discomfort in 2 of the boys' faces, that as I named it, they knew. They knew. They weren't totally comfortable with what was happening. And I don't know what's going on in the 3rd boy's life and what he's enacting right now and how he's trying to fit in, or how important that acceptance is to him in this moment. So I'm just saying to them, and they're like, we're sorry. And I said, that doesn't even, what matters to me is I just want you to think about how they felt. And your intent may be fun, but I want you to think about how they felt, and that they're just 3 sisters hanging out on a Friday at a playground, and they should be able to be here and be free, just like you. And the boys are like, oh, sorry, and they were, razzing each other, and they got on their bikes and they left. And they left in the same direction as these girls. So my husband's like, okay, well, let's go get the car. And get the kids. And I was like, no time. So I was worked up. So I hopped in the car, and I drove down the street, and I turned up, I saw the girls were walking, and the boys were long past them. So I don't know if they said anything to them, but they went by, and I was happy and relieved. And then I pulled over, and in a non-menacing way to talk to these girls, I just said, hi, I'm really sorry that I didn't say anything back there. Those boys were being intimidating and scary, and I could tell you were scared, and I'm sorry I was scared, and I didn't say anything. And boys don't deserve, you deserve to be safe everywhere you go. And anything that tells a boy or a man that it's okay to act like that at the cost of women's safety, that's not okay. And I said that to them, and the little girl said, well, that's nice. And I was like, yeah, we're women and girls. And, I was like, yeah. And I said, do you have far to walk? And they're like, no, we're just over there. And I was like, okay, you feel safe? And they said, yeah, thank you. I said, okay, well, I'm sorry I didn't say something before. And then I got in my car, still worked up, and then I just pulled over and cried. I just wept. And the little girl in me, who would have loved someone to just say to me as a girl, you get to have as much space as the boys on your soccer team. And if they don't pass you the ball, that's not right. Like, how much I would have loved in any of those different moments to not be told, you're so loud for a little girl. You talk so much. Like, how much I would just love to have had somebody say, aren't you awesome, living in your light and your gifts, being who you are? I would have loved that. And maybe that kind of early intervention, maybe I wouldn't have taken on so much of the socialization and the shame of my own body and its natural processes. Just feeling like somehow I'm less than. And what's amazing to me in thinking about the way that Bell Hooks is talking and the way that they're talking about toxic masculinity is that's not the inherent necessary form of masculinity. That's a form of toxic masculinity, of patriarchal masculinity. And what could we reclaim by defining it differently? And what can I claim in defining my own femininity and my masculinity and my own gender identity in a way that's more authentic and not so tied to all of the ways that we hurt each other? So, and I was happy to see that later that night my son was saying, those boys were being mean and mommy said something. I was like, yes, I did. And my husband was saying, yes, boys should be nice to girls. I don't know why boys think they have to be tough for me. And I was like, yes, and I'm married well, to boot. It's like, ha. Even though I was scared, right? I was scared. I was playing out my role. I was being a quiet woman, looking to other people for cues. I think we were all scared. It takes courage. They said integrity can be painful. Because actually being a whole person, being my same self everywhere I go, means that when something like that is happening and my scared self doesn't want to say anything, what does it mean to actually say something? Or what does it mean if I say that to my boss? Or what does it mean if I say that to my partner? Or what does it mean if I say that to my father? Or whoever the person may be that you're in relationship, like what's the cost? But I felt so moved to show so much and to go longer than I've been really good about not going over, but today, it's just longer because, men are dying by suicide at 4 times the rate. And not that I want anyone to die, but it's so toxic. And it's like every day you turn on the news, there's some male killing someone. And there's so much more male teen suicide. And, it's like we're giving boys a horrible lot in life. And Bell Hooks was saying, well, we don't have a feminist movement yet of men who are saying, we need a revolution so that we can be whole emotional selves. And we're tired of this. And she says one of the reasons is because sometimes women, we don't even want it. She said that in one of her relationships with a man, she always wanted him to say more, tell her how he felt. And he would say, I love you. And she'd say, okay, well, tell me more about that. And he's like, I don't have the words for that. And she felt lonely. She felt emotionally isolated in her own relationship. I know so many women who struggle with this. And yet, Bell Hooks says, and you know what, though? When he started sharing emotions, it was like, well, but not those emotions, right? She said that she was still upholding these patriarchal notions of what it meant to be a man, and that if he was supposed to be a protector of the wounded, and so she's clearly the wounded, but if he comes to her wounded, then how's he supposed to be her protector? And the number of times that we women can shut down males' emotions, saying, no, you need to get back in that pigeonhole. And if you've read any Brene Brown, she talks about how, and how men have said to her, you write about all these women, but could you write about men? Because I'll tell you what, whenever I open up and be my whole self with the women in my life, they just like shut it down. And she said, you know what, if you show me a woman who can be with a man in his whole range of emotions and just be with him, I'll show you a woman who's done her work. And if you can show me a man who's willing to do that in front of a woman, I'll show you a man who's done his work. And that's very gender binary. It's not so, but it's not that simple, right? That's the work I think we're all called to do. We're called to be whole. We're called to be authentic. And this is a justice issue. I mean, it may just be like, it's not just our emotions. It's how we are in relationship. It's what we welcome in others. It's what we cast aside. And one of the ways we can do that, and you can do great justice work today, is by just beginning in our own bodies. So after I watched this, one thing that came up for me was I noticed how the energy that I bring to raising my sons, and especially my first child, who's 2.5, I realized that I approach him. So I knew when I found out I was having a boy, I was actually scared. Because the people who have hurt me or been violent against me in my life have all been men. And I thought, oh no, am I giving birth to a male who can then turn around and hurt me? And my husband and I are deeply committed to transcending gender norms. And so we raise them differently. But that traumatized part of me was scared of my own baby. Oh man. So this stuff goes deep. And even as that's one of my truths, I noticed that the way I approach my son sometimes, it's like I approach him thinking he's going to want me to roughhouse with him. Like he wants a wild ride. Like what are the gender expectations I'm bringing into interactions with Gabriel? And when is my humor, or when am I just being a little bit more aggressive than I would? And I'm just noticing it in my body. Like my body is giving me all the cues of saying, ooh, this feels very familiar, but this is actually not who I want to be. So I've started just being quiet with him, not always talking, not always getting physical, instead just coming up and like gently rubbing his back and saying, how you doing? Or I just give him a kiss, and I do it quietly. And this kid loves to be startled, and he loves a good poop and fart joke. And I get lots of points when I do those things. But I'm trying to expand my repertoire. Like how can I also be gentle with my son? And so I've been doing that, and you know what? It was like that he changed. It was amazing how much the space that I open for him, how he comes in and like plays the part. And so in me playing a different role, he did this. This is the greatest thing. Last Sunday, it was really nice. So we were outside, we were planting sugar snap peas in the garden, and Ari, the 7-month-old, is laying on a blanket watching us, shoving leaves in his mouth. And when we finished, Gabriel actually, when I was doing something, he lay down, put his arm around Ari, and he said, it's just you and me, Ari, looking at the sky. And he said, what a beautiful cloudy day. And I was like, okay. It was so awesome. And so I just stayed quiet. He was being tender. And sometimes I can even have, when my son is dancing or singing, I have this impulse to like stop it. And he must notice that, because the other day he was changing a baby doll's diaper, and he lifted up the legs and he went, wipe, wipe. And then he just stopped. He looked at me and he put it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, why does he think that with me? He doesn't do that with my husband. Why is he doing, what am I bringing to the space? It just kills me. So I'm being gentle. I'm being quiet. And my son, after we finished gardening, says, Mama, come sit here and watch the sunset with me. There was no sunset. It was super cloudy. It was right before, like, up north, people were getting hail and stuff, and it was about to rain, it looked like. And I was like, okay, buddy. And I just went and sat there. And he came and he sits in my lap. And he cuddles in. And you know what? Even yesterday at Costco, he was putting his arm around Ari and kissing him. And then I'd lean forward and he'd kiss me. It's different. He's already being different. It was that small of a shift. Just in my own energy, in thinking, and using my own body as a resource. Like, how can I just be soft in this encounter with my son and see who he brings? It's little things. It's little things, and how we can participate in perpetuating patriarchy that hurts us, that hurts each other. And so I'm working on it. I invite you to join me in working on it. The reading that we had at the beginning from the Gospel of Thomas said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Well, let's work together. Let's practice together in bringing forth one whole person across the board. Bring one person by our very being, we can participate in our own liberation and that of one another and the people around us. May it be so.